So Amazon announced where it'll put its new headquarters. They settled on Northern Virginia and New York. Now, I was not under the impression that they were going to do like a split sort of deal, but that's what they went with. Andrew Cuomo, I didn't know this, but I heard about it recently. Apparently, Andrew Cuomo literally said he'd change his name to Amazon Cuomo if they pick New York for their headquarters. Hey, perhaps the state and corporations are getting too close, and perhaps that's a giant issue that we shouldn't all be super comfortable with. But the details of the deal are an absolute disaster. The details are abysmal. So Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, literally, gets a $325 million cash grant. He gets up to $1 billion in tax incentives. Now, I read the total package that he's getting with this deal is about $1.5 billion. And taxpayers literally have to pay for the creation of a helipad for Jeff Bezos. So the richest man in the world, who has well over $100 billion, it will be people like me, because I live in New York, but it'll be people like me who will be funding with our tax dollars a fucking helipad for him. Seems kind of like the dumbest fucking idea ever, and the whole point of it is that it was based on corruption. Now, on top of that, Jeff Bezos actually, to pick Northern Virginia was interesting. People were like, that's strange. They seem to be offering much less in terms of incentives than other places. So why would you do something like that? Well, come to find out, I think it was David Sirota who broke the story, or at the very least he tweeted it and I saw from him. They're doing that because they're going to get a $10 billion contract from the Pentagon. So stop and think about this. Jeff Bezos already, if I'm not mistaken, he's already working with the CIA. Now he's going to get a $10 billion contract from the Pentagon. And then this is the same guy who owns a tremendous share of multiple newspapers, including the Washington Post. Yeah, it seems to me like there's an issue there, and we're barely masking the fact that we're an oligarchy at this point. That's what that looks like to me. So, the fact that he's going to get a helipad that blew up online, and everybody's like, are you fucking kidding me? And this is at a time when, there are places in New York that desperately need investment. But instead of doing that, we're just turning over a gargantuan amount, a colossal amount of taxpayer money to the richest guy in the world to try to incentivize him to come here. Build your own fucking helipad, dipshit. But it's almost like he was playing a game where which states can offer me the most amount of money. There were proposals that were just out of this world unconstitutional. We covered the story when it broke. Some places were saying, hey, if you come to us, you'll be allowed to collect taxes from your own workers. So instead of your workers paying taxes to the respective state government that they would happen to be in, they pay taxes to you. Are you kidding me? So we're destroying the idea of having a civil society. At that point, you're talking about little corporatocracy fiefdoms. This is insanity. And I feel like there's very little reckoning with the reality of the situation. People are just like, oh yeah, what a crafty idea to try to get this billionaire to be benevolent and stay here. Why should the people have to fork over a shitload of money to prove themselves to the billionaire? That's the guy who's the richest guy in the world. The fuck are we talking about here? It's insane. It's like when they say, ExxonMobil and the oil companies, they need just a ridiculous amount of corporate welfare because they need to have money to do research and development. They're some of the most profitable corporations on the fucking planet. Do your own research and development. Are you kidding me? It shows how corrupt everything is. Nobody's going to your local fucking deli or your local dry cleaner and going, I think you guys can use a government subsidy. because maybe you want to innovate the way that you do your dry cleaning. I hear there's some new technology out there. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's give you, a nice corporate welfare check and you can upgrade. Nobody does that with small businesses. It all comes down to corruption. So big businesses like ExxonMobil or Amazon, they buy the government and then the government's like, oh, us? Did we just give you over $1 billion worth of corporate welfare? Tee-hee-hee. Well, that was totally not corrupt, and that's not really a bribe or anything. That's just us realizing that you guys need to do research and development, even though one of you is the richest fucking man in the world, and the other one's in the oil companies, you're some of the most profitable corporations in the world. So what happened in response to this, and this is really interesting because you see the upsides and the downsides of Democrats in this story. You have Cuomo bending over backwards to say, I'll do whatever for Amazon. I don't give a shit. Here, take all of our taxpayer money. So Democratic Assemblyman in New York, Ron Kim, announced in response to this that he's going to try and block it. And he wants to slash New York's economic development subsidies and use the money to buy up and cancel student debt. So here's what Splinter News says. This is a quote directly from Ron Kim. Giving Jeff Bezos hundreds of millions of dollars is an immoral waste of taxpayers' money when it's crystal clear that the money would create more jobs and more economic growth when it is used to relieve student debt, said Kim, who recently published an op-ed with law professor Zephyr Teachout criticizing the Amazon deal. Quote, giving Amazon this type of corporate welfare is no different, if not worse, than Donald Trump giving trillions in corporate tax breaks at the federal level. There's no correlation between healthy, sustainable job creation and corporate giveaways. If we use this money to cancel distressed student debt instead, there would be immediate positive GDP growth, job creation, and impactful social economic returns. New York has the most expensive set of corporate subsidy programs in the country, and a report by the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research found that such subsidies, quote, are not cost-effective with either no statistically significant effects or large cost per job. Kim noted in 2015 alone, New York gave out more than $8 billion in corporate incentives. He pointed to a recent study by the Levy Institute that found canceling student debt would result in an increase in real GDP and a decrease in the average unemployment rate. So, in other words, yes, Cuomo won re-election and became governor in New York again, but there was also basically a Bernie Sanders-esque left-wing wave. So Democrats took back control of the state legislature, and among those Democrats are people who actually represent what the Democrats are supposed to represent, including Assemblyman Ron Kim. So Cuomo is everything negative about the Democrats and corporatism, and we've gone over his record in detail, and it's pretty shitty. I mean, he's given ground on like minimum wage, for example, and some other issues, which is good. Credit where credit is due. But this is just inexcusable. So now you have the people who are doing what Democrats are supposed to do saying, no, we're going to block your shitty deal because this is ridiculous. We're going to take all the money that you want to give in corporate welfare to the richest fucking guy in the world, and we're going to use that to cancel student loan debt instead. So this is indicative of the civil war that's happening within the Democratic Party. And this is why it's so important that we're clear about which side we're on and that we, do our best and fight nonstop to have the proper side win. So we'll see what happens, but God damn it, man. What an insane situation that we're living in. My taxpayer money is going to have to buy a helipad for the richest man in the fucking world. And the government is like, yeah, totally. No, I'm down with that. I support it. Cuomo basically negotiated this deal in secret, and he gave Jeff Bezos everything he fucking wanted. Like I said, the reason they picked Northern Virginia is because they want that $10 billion Pentagon contract. It should scare the shit out of everybody that the richest man in the world is in bed with the CIA, the Pentagon, and he also controls many media outlets. I wonder if those media outlets are going to be critical of him. I mean, look at this situation that we're in, man. It's almost like a comic book. Like, it almost seems fake. It's so ridiculous. And this is all at the same time. You guys know the deal. We have all the student loan debt, which is why Ron Kim's bill is so awesome. but we have student loan debt, we have medical debt, medical bankruptcies, people who aren't covered, our infrastructure falling apart. I mean, it's just hilariously stupid to think like, oh yeah, just bend over backwards to Bezos because jobs. Help provide jobs, even though that the amount of money they're giving him, I forget the exact number, but it works out to, what, over $40,000 per job or something like that? So taxpayers are basically funding all of these jobs, and Bezos is running out the back door with fucking profits. I mean, it's insane what they do. They fleece the taxpayers. So, and by the way, bipartisan in terms of people, fighting back against this and saying this is ridiculous. Literally, you had Tucker Carlson back up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she spoke out on this and said this is absolutely absurd. And you even had Ben Shapiro who said a similar thing. And I mean, the only one who somehow missed the picture here is Dave Rubin because he's a fucking idiot. And he was like going after Ocasio-Cortez. Ocasio-Cortez is taking a position that's not only reasonable among social democrats or democratic socialists, it's also, again, like I said, the reason why Tucker and Ben Shapiro backed it up is because they're trying to be somewhat consistent with their ideology and believing in the free market, and they don't think corporate welfare should be handed out like this. So, and that's not to say Tucker Carlson or Ben Shapiro are right on other issues. You guys know I'm fucking couldn't disagree with them more on almost all issues. But this is one point where they were like, yeah, Ocasio-Cortez is kind of right about this, but somehow, idiot Dave Rubin missed it. But anyway, there you have it. You have Amazon. This is corporation and state just coming together in a way that Mussolini would describe as that's what fascism is. Corporation and the state coming together. Now, obviously, there are other elements of fascism that are probably equally as important, if not more important, in terms of what defines it. But that's what Mussolini said. One of the original fascists. Like, yeah, corporation and state getting together, that's what it is. And now you see Amazon, the richest man in the world, snuggling up to all these governors, to the federal government. And by the way, at the same time, lying about it. He had articles out after people were like, hey, you did this thing because you want the $10 billion Pentagon contract. He's like, no, that's not been guaranteed to us yet. They're the only people that meet the criteria to get that $10 billion Pentagon contract. So what are you talking about? And that was rigged too, I'm sure. Like, oh, okay, how are we going to do it? Well, you have to have over X amount of money and assets or whatever the fuck, and that's the only people who can get this contract. Oh, look at that. Only Amazon is even capable of getting the contract. So this should concern everybody. And unfortunately, I see concern among the people, but almost none among political elites. And that's a giant problem.